So first things first, I want to say that I do think the majority of the calls went Kansas City's way in this one. I think that, that roughing the passer thing on Joe Burrow probably could have been called. The Chiefs getting an extra down situation was definitely crazy. I mean, that, obviously was a huge break for Kansas City. And there were some others, but I'm also seeing a lot of people talk about certain controversies that just aren't penalties, that to me, at least, are not penalties, and I don't think should be getting lumped in with those other calls, and so that's what I want to do in this video. My goal here is not to say, actually, there were no bad calls, actually, the NFL doesn't need to do anything, but to try and just set the record straight on specific calls that some people have just misunderstood. So first, this is the one where I've seen it on Twitter a decent amount, I think, and by prominent accounts, I won't call anyone out by name, but, prominent figures in the NFL world have tweeted out like, oh my God, can you believe holding didn't get called here? Well, let's talk about it. So first, there's that interior Cincinnati Bengal player. That's the first guy we have to talk about. And he's going to do what you call a rip move, which is you get your arm kind of underneath the arm of the offensive lineman. Watch how he does this. Watch how he gets his right arm, kind of gets underneath the offensive lineman he's going up against. What's the significance of that? The significance is on a rip move here, it is not a hold. This is a legal time to hold, essentially. You're allowed to do this because of the fact that the rip move basically puts your arm into a holding position. It would basically be a free hold if you did a rip move every time, so they had to make an exception for it. So this is not a hold, but that's not the only hold that people were talking about. There's this play on Trey Hendrickson, again, same play, just different side of the play. Well, what is a hold? We're going to be looking at a lot of definitions in this video. Again, we're getting into the weeds here a little bit, but hopefully, again, my hope here with this is that you guys can sit here and say, oh, okay, there will be people who say, I see now. I didn't understand that was a rule. Now I do. So this is the definition of a hold, is when a player uses his hands to maternally, not sure how you pronounce that word, but it means substantially restrict an opponent or alter the defender's path or angle of pursuit. It is a foul regardless of whether the blocker's hands are inside or outside the frame of a defender's body. Substantial restrictions must include, but are not limited to, grabbing or tackling an opponent, holding, jerking, twisting, or turning him, or pulling him to the ground. That's what it is. So going back over here, it's also worth mentioning the NFL does allow you to grab on to the opposing player. So even though it says grabbing in the rule, you are allowed to grab onto the player as long as when you grab, you do not substantially alter their path or angle of pursuit. That's basically the way that it works. So essentially, if you're blocking like normal, but you grab onto the defensive lineman, that is allowed. If it wasn't allowed, again, there would be pressure every single play. There'd be sacks every single play. Like, that's what happens every single play. And you see here, was there a bit of a moment where you could argue it? I think yes. I think there's a small sliver of maybe a little bit where you could argue that Hendrickson had he had his pathway altered slightly due to it. Is this a hold? Is this something that you would call in this situation? I don't think so. I just don't. To me, this does not feel substantial. It doesn't feel really significant. It doesn't feel like a massive hold, especially, again, I know that a penalty is a penalty whenever it happens, but especially in this spot, I would have been surprised if it got held. I think it got called. The reality is, I know it's kind of a meme, but the reality is, if you called a hold like this, you would be calling a hold on every play. You just would. I also say, I just from doing this show, I know some people who are really into O-line play and stuff. All of them agree this was good blocking. That's what they all say. And I defer to them on this stuff. All the people that I know are saying, like, no, this was good blocking. This was the correct call made, so I'll defer to them. Okay, next controversy is the intentional grounding controversy. I have to say, I think there's a camera angle that makes it look worse than it is. The broadcast angle, I think, gives us the best clear view of it. So again, we got to read, what is intentional grounding? Well, Section 2, Article 1, the definition of intentional grounding is, it is a foul for intentional grounding if a passer facing an imminent loss of yardage because of pressure from the defense throws a forward pass without a realistic chance of completion. A realistic chance of completion is defined as a pass that is thrown in the direction of and lands in the vicinity of an originally eligible offensive receiver. So, okay, if it's a pass that's thrown thrown and lands in the vicinity of an original eligible receiver, it is now considered it's considered a fair pass. If you throw it in a way where it's not in the vicinity of an originally eligible receiver, it's not. So again, realistic chance of completion. I think that's the best way to phrase it. Realistic chance. Was there a realistic chance of completion on this play? Look at as Joe Burrow takes the snap, and we're going to see that the closest player, there's no one in the backfield here. That's definitely a notable thing, because a lot of times these plays will be considered realistic chance of completion if there's someone in the backfield, but that's not the case. The halfback has ran a route. That is going to be the player who is going to be the intended target. So let's just, I'll ask you the question. Do you think that there was a realistic chance of completion on this play? Joe Burrow basically just spikes it. I mean, it's a little bit comical. Obviously, there was no realistic chance of completion. By letter of the law and by spirit of the rule, that is what grounding is there for, is to make sure that you can't just do that every time to avoid sacks. To me, this is the right call. I know that people like to make fun of the refs and people like to say, oh no, NFL is rigged, Bengals got screwed, all of that stuff. But do you think that Mixon could have caught that ball in any scenario? If Mixon was the better than Randy Moss, is he making a catch? Obviously not. There's just no way that was going to be a completion. Yes, the NFL will give you a little bit of a gray area, but to me, this is black and white. Now let's go over here, though. This one I do not have a definitive look on. This is the block in the back, which looks very bad. I don't know if it is, though. This is the one where I'm willing to, I don't know. That's kind of my take on it. Again, I know some Bengals fans are going to be very mad that I'm even going through this, but it's important to get the truth right, I think. Even though these videos tend to be very controversial of me doing this for some reason, I think this is important to do. So, again, let's get into it. What is a block in the back? That's, again, always very important. We got to make sure we know the rule before we discuss it. A block in the back is a block that is delivered from behind an opponent above his waist. So it is not a block in the back if a player is making a personal attempt to recover a loose ball, if a player turns away from the blocker when contact is imminent, if both of the blocker's hands are on the opponent's side. If either hand is on the back, it's a foul. So that's kind of worth noting, is if it's on the player's side, it is not a block in the back. This is why that controversial block in the back on Mark Andrews in the wild card round was not a block in the back. The hands were on the opponent's side. That's what matters, is where do the hands go, and also if you're behind them. It's both. It's not one or the other. So in this situation, we really didn't get a great look at it, unfortunately, and that's kind of why it's just hard to say exactly if it is a block in the back or not. To me, it looks very debatable as if it's a block in the back or a block on the side. Watch as it's going to be a player blocking him towards the inside, and I'll show it a couple times. You see him kind of block him to the inside like that. It's very close, right? But keep in mind, all that has to happen is if a hand is on the back by the blocker, then it's a foul. So while it feels like definitely the majority of the contact, to me, is from its side, is it all on its side, or is part of it on the back? Also, if it's below the waist, so if he blocked his butt there, which kind of feels like it's possible that that's what happened, if that's where the contact was, that is also not a penalty in this scenario. I'll try to zoom it in. I'm not sure if this helps. Again, we're really doing with tough quality here. I wish it was one of those movies where you could enhance and everything looks perfectly. Again, what we see is that it's very close. I just don't know for certain which way it is. I can't say definitively from this angle. There was another angle we saw that, made it look worse for sure. It would be this one, which this is the second we saw the play. They didn't show it any earlier than this, unfortunately. If they just showed it like a half second earlier, we would have known for sure. This is the best we got. And you see the contact has already happened at this point by 23. It's already happened. So by this point, after the contact, he definitely gets behind the Bengals player. But it doesn't matter what happens after the contact, obviously. It matters what happens when the contact happened. And again, you're allowed to be behind a player if the contact happens. It just doesn't hit the player's back. As you see, again, my guess is it was probably a block in the back. That's my guess. I can't say that for certain, though. I just can't. I know people will, other people will say, oh, no, definitely a block in the back. To me, it wasn't definite. It's possible, but this is one of those, if there was a challenge flag and you could challenge this play, I would rule it no conclusive evidence one way or the other. That's kind of how I would rule it. Finally, one last play is actually the same play. It's that block in the back play, but this time in a different area. This is just funny to me. This to me feels like a clear flop. You see a Chiefs player does kind of create the contact, but there's, he just has the contact. He's not pushing him in any direction. Watch this Bengals player. Look, as you see, he really, he sells it a little bit. No doubt about that. I think a little bit funny there. Hey, trying to make a play, trying to see if you can do it, but I don't know. Maybe you had a chance to make a tackle there instead of doing a flop, but probably not. Probably just the best call there was to try and make a play. Just didn't work out in terms of drawing a penalty. But yeah, again, like I said at the beginning of this video, there were some bad calls. I'm not trying to suggest that there weren't, but I think that there's a bit of people just love to lump in all of these calls together and say, oh, there was this, and this, and this, and this, and this. And it's like, no, there were a couple of tough plays. Worth mentioning, if the Chiefs scored a touchdown on that 3rd down and 6 play that they got to redo, or 3rd down and 8 play, that they got to redo, then it still would have gotten called back and the Chiefs would have gotten screwed, Again, it was a tough break by Cincinnati, but it didn't end up mattering. There was also that overturned, play where I thought it should have been 4th and 1. I didn't love that call either. I'm not saying that there weren't bad calls in this one. I'm just saying that the ones that are weirdly getting the most attention, I feel like, are the ones that I don't think were actually bad calls. I think there was other ones that were bad calls. But yeah, hopefully, I at least, hopefully you learned a rule or two and understand it a little bit better, at least of why something got called, even if you still don't agree with the rule. But yeah, those are my thoughts on it. What do you guys think? I'm sure there will be a spirited discussion in the comments section, so hey, that's what the comment section is for. Let me know what you think. Always love hearing from you, and of course, as always, thanks for watching.